Dalton stood frozen in the hallway of his own home, his hand gripping the wall as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears, drowning out everything except the words that had just shattered his entire world. The voice belonged to Cordelia, his mother-in-law, and what she had just said to his wife Marisol made his blood run cold. He had only meant to test his wife, to see how she would react in a moment of crisis. He never imagined that such a simple lie would unravel a truth so devastating that it made him question everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his life, and the woman he had loved for 7 years. The words echoed in his mind over and over like a cruel song he couldn't stop hearing. His knees felt weak. His throat was tight. And in that moment, pressed against the wall of the hallway leading to their kitchen, Dalton realized that sometimes the truth you discover isn't the truth you were looking for. Sometimes it's so much worse. But to understand how he got there, how one simple test turned his entire world upside down, we have to go back to where it all began. 3 weeks earlier, Dalton had been having lunch with his best friend, Emmett, at a sports bar downtown. They met every other Thursday, a tradition they'd kept alive since college despite their busy lives. Emmett worked in sales, always had a story to tell, and that particular Thursday, he told a story that would plant a seed in Dalton's mind. "So get this," Emmett said, chomping on a chicken wing. "My buddy Trace decided to test his girlfriend. He told her he lost his job, right? Just to see how she'd react." Emmett laughed, shaking his head. "Man, you should have seen it. The woman went ballistic, started talking about how he was irresponsible, how she couldn't rely on him, all this stuff. They broke up 2 days later." Dalton had frowned, wiping his hands on a napkin. "That's messed up. Why would he do that?" "Because, bro, you gotta know who's really in your corner." Emmett leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "Think about it. When everything falls apart, when you lose everything, who's gonna stand by you? That's the real test of love, isn't it?" Dalton had brushed it off at the time. He and Marisol had been married for 5 years, together for 7. She was his rock, his best friend, the woman who had stood by him through his father's death, through his career changes, through everything. He didn't need to test her. He knew she loved him. But the seed had been planted, and seeds have a way of growing, especially when you water them with doubt. The doubt started small. Dalton worked as a senior project manager at a construction firm, and the job was stable, well-paying. They lived in a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina. They had 2 cars, took vacations twice a year, and were even talking about starting a family soon. Life was good, better than good. But then he started noticing things, small things, things that probably meant nothing but somehow felt like everything when you looked at them through the lens of doubt. Marisol had always been practical about money. She kept spreadsheets, tracked their expenses, made sure they stayed within budget. Dalton had always appreciated that about her. She was the planner, the organizer, while he was more spontaneous. They balanced each other out. But lately he noticed how she'd check their bank account more frequently, how she'd grown quiet when he mentioned his co-worker Jensen getting laid off due to company restructuring, how she'd asked him, just casually, if his job was secure, if he'd heard any rumors about more layoffs. "Everything's fine, Mari," he'd assured her, using the nickname he'd given her years ago. "My position is solid, don't worry." She'd smiled, kissed his cheek, and changed the subject. But the worry in her eyes had lingered, and it made him wonder. Then there was her mother. Cordelia had never been Dalton's biggest fan. It wasn't that she was openly hostile, but there was always a coolness there, a distance. She lived 20 minutes away in a sprawling house that Marisol's late father had left her, a house that reminded everyone of the wealth Marisol had grown up with, and the more modest means Dalton had come from. Cordelia visited every Sunday for dinner, a tradition Marisol insisted on. And every Sunday, Dalton felt the weight of her judgment. She'd comment on their house, suggesting upgrades they couldn't afford. She'd mention Marisol's ex-boyfriend, Thaddeus, who was now a successful surgeon. She'd ask pointed questions about Dalton's career trajectory, his retirement plans, his investments. "Mother just worries," Marisol would say afterward, as if that explained everything. "She wants to make sure we're secure." Secure. That word came up a lot, and the more Dalton heard it, the more he wondered what it really meant to his wife. Was he enough? Would he still be enough if everything they had built together disappeared? The thoughts consumed him. He'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to Marisol breathe softly beside him, and wonder. He'd watch her during dinner, during their morning coffee routine, during their evening walks around the neighborhood, and he'd search for signs. Signs of what, he wasn't even sure. Dissatisfaction? Resentment? A hint that maybe she'd married him for stability rather than love? It was irrational. He knew it was irrational. But knowing something and feeling something are two very different things. 2 weeks after that lunch with Emmett, Dalton made a decision. He would do the test. Not because he didn't trust Marisol, he told himself, but because he needed to silence the doubt. He needed to prove to himself that his fears were unfounded, that his wife loved him for who he was, not what he provided. He planned it carefully. He chose a Friday evening, when they'd both be home and relaxed. He rehearsed what he'd say, how he'd say it. He even practiced his facial expression in the bathroom mirror, trying to look appropriately devastated. It felt wrong even as he planned it. A voice in his head, one that sounded suspiciously like his late father, told him this was a terrible idea. Trust wasn't something you tested. Love wasn't a game. But he pushed the voice aside. Just this once, he needed to know. Friday came. Dalton left work at his usual time, his stomach churning with anxiety and guilt. He sat in his car in the driveway for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, questioning everything. He could still back out. He could walk in, kiss his wife, and pretend this had never crossed his mind. But he didn't. He walked through the front door at 6:15, loosening his tie with shaking hands. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. Marisol was cooking, something she did every Friday, her way of unwinding after a long week at her job as a pediatric nurse. "Hey, honey," she called from the kitchen. "How was your day?" Dalton set his briefcase down, took a deep breath, and walked toward the kitchen. His heart was racing. His palms were sweaty. He felt like he was about to jump off a cliff, not knowing if there was water or rocks below. Marisol turned when he entered, a wooden spoon in her hand, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore her favorite worn jeans and one of his old college t-shirts. She looked beautiful, comfortable, happy. She looked like home. And he was about to blow it all up with a lie. "Mari," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "We need to talk." Her smile faded immediately. She set the spoon down, turned off the stove, and turned to face him fully. "What's wrong? You look pale. Are you okay?" He paused, steeling himself. "I got fired today." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Marisol's face went through a series of expressions so quickly he almost couldn't track them. Shock, confusion, disbelief, and then something else, something he couldn't quite read. "What?" she whispered. "Dalton, what are you talking about? How? Why?" "Restructuring," he said, the lie flowing more easily now that he'd started. They called me into Hamilton's office this afternoon, said they were eliminating my position, effective immediately. Marisol's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. Oh my God, Dalton. She crossed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Her reaction flooded him with relief and guilt in equal measure. She was crying for him. She was holding him like she'd never let go. This was what he'd needed to see. Proof that she loved him regardless of his job, his income, his status. We'll figure it out, she murmured into his chest. We'll be okay. We'll get through this together. You're not upset? He asked, hating himself for pushing but needing to hear more. She pulled back, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Upset? Honey, I'm upset that you're hurting. I'm upset that those bastards let you go after everything you've done for that company. But upset with you? Never. This isn't your fault. Dalton felt his own eyes sting with tears. Real tears, born from the guilt of deceiving the woman who loved him so completely. He was about to confess, to tell her the truth, to apologize for being such a fool when her phone rang. Marisol glanced at it. It's my mother. I should... It's okay, Dalton said. Take it. She squeezed his hand and walked toward the living room, answering as she went. Hey, Mom. No, now's not a good time. Something's happened. Dalton stayed in the kitchen, his mind reeling. He'd been so wrong. So incredibly wrong to doubt her. He'd come clean now, tell her the truth, and they'd laugh about it. Maybe. Or maybe she'd be furious with him for testing her. Either way, he deserved whatever came next. But then he heard Marisol's voice, low and urgent, coming from the living room. Mom, Dalton got fired today. I know. Can you come over? Please? I just need you here. A pause, then, can you come now? He's in the kitchen. I'll tell him I need to grab something from the garage. We can talk there. Dalton's stomach dropped. There was something in her tone, something furtive, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Why did she need to talk to her mother privately? Why did she sound so secretive? He moved quietly toward the doorway, staying just out of sight. 30 minutes, Marisol was saying. Okay. Yes. No, don't say anything to him when you get here. We'll talk first. She ended the call. And Dalton quickly retreated to the kitchen, his mind racing. He heard her footsteps approaching. Hey, she said, her voice carefully controlled. My mom's going to come over. I hope that's okay. I need her right now. Of course, Dalton said, studying her face. She looked calm, but there was something underneath. Tension, worry, something. The 30 minutes that followed were torture. Marisol puttered around the kitchen, reheating dinner, making small talk, asking him questions about the firing that he had to make up answers for on the spot. Every lie felt like a stone in his stomach. Every loving touch she gave him felt like a knife. When the doorbell rang, Marisol practically ran to answer it. Dalton heard low voices in the entryway. Then Marisol's voice. Dalton, I'm going to take Mom to the garage real quick. I need to show her something with the car. Okay, he called back, his suspicion growing. He waited exactly 2 minutes before he quietly made his way to the hallway that led to the garage. The door was slightly ajar, and voices filtered through. His mother-in-law's voice, sharp and clear. And that's when he heard it. The words that made his world stop spinning. That's when everything changed. Dalton pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing, straining to hear every word through the slightly open door. I knew this would happen eventually. Cordelia's voice was cold, matter of fact. I told you 5 years ago not to marry him. I told you he wasn't stable enough. wasn't ambitious enough. Now look where you are." Dalton's chest constricted. Every word felt like a physical blow. "Mom, please!" Marisol's voice was strained, desperate. "Not now. I can't deal with this right now." "Can't deal with it? Marisol, this is exactly what we need to deal with. How long until you lose the house? How long until everything your father worked for gets dragged down by this man's failure?" "He's not a failure," Marisol said, but her voice lacked conviction. It was weak, defeated, and that weakness cut Dalton deeper than any knife could. "Isn't he?" Cordelia's laugh was bitter. "He just lost his job, Marisol. And let's be honest, this isn't the first time he's struggled. Remember 3 years ago when his department almost got eliminated? Remember how stressed you were, how you couldn't sleep, how you came crying to me about whether you'd made a mistake?" Dalton felt the blood drain from his face. 3 years ago. He remembered that time. There had been rumors of layoffs, but his position had been safe. Marisol had seemed fine, supportive. She'd never said anything about doubts, about regrets, about crying to her mother about marrying him. "That was different," Marisol protested weakly. "I was just scared. Every couple goes through doubts." "These aren't normal doubts, sweetheart. You know what you need to do. We've talked about this. The money your father left you, the trust fund, it's yours. But if you stay married to him, and he drags you into debt, into bankruptcy, you could lose everything. Your father made sure there were protections, but they only work if you act before things get too bad." Dalton's mind was reeling. Trust fund? Marisol had always told him her father left everything to Cordelia, that there was no inheritance for her. They'd built their life on their combined income, always careful with money, always saving. Had she been lying to him this entire time? "I don't want to talk about divorce," Marisol said, and Dalton's heart stopped completely. Divorce. The word hung in the air like poison gas. "I love him, Mom. I do." "Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't secure your future." Cordelia's voice softened slightly, becoming almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I know you care about him, but caring isn't enough. You're 32 years old, Marisol. You want children. You want the life you deserve. Can he give you that now? Without a job? Without prospects? He'll find another job. He's good at what he does. And if he doesn't? How long are you willing to wait? How long are you willing to sacrifice? You've already given him 7 years. You've already put your dreams on hold because he wanted to build stability first. Well, look how that turned out." There was a long silence. Dalton waited, every muscle in his body tense, praying for Marisol to defend him, to tell her mother she was wrong, to fight for their marriage. "I don't know what to do," Marisol finally whispered, and those words shattered something fundamental inside Dalton's chest. "You know exactly what to do," Cordelia said firmly. "You call Thaddeus. You tell him you've been thinking about him. You explore your options before you're trapped." "Thaddeus is married now," Marisol said. "Separated," Cordelia corrected. "I ran into his mother last week at the club. He's been asking about you. He never got over you, Marisol, and now he's a surgeon, established, successful. Everything you should have had." Dalton couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The walls were closing in. This couldn't be happening. This had to be a nightmare. He'd created a test, a simple test, and somehow he'd stumbled into a truth so devastating it felt like his entire life was a lie. "I need time to think," Marisol said. "Don't take too long. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. Trust me, sweetheart. I waited too long with your father. Stayed through hard times, and look where it got me. Alone. Yes, he left me comfortable, but I wasted years of my life on worry and struggle. Don't make my mistakes." Dalton heard footsteps moving toward the door. He stumbled backward, his mind blank with panic. He needed to get back to the kitchen, needed to pretend he hadn't heard any of this. His legs felt like they were made of lead, but he forced himself to move, to walk as quietly as possible back toward the kitchen. He made it just in time, grabbing a glass from the cabinet and filling it with water at the sink, trying to steady his shaking hands. Marisol and Cordelia emerged moments later. Cordelia's face was composed, pleasant even, but her eyes were calculating as they swept over Dalton. Marisol looked pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "Dalton," Cordelia said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm so sorry to hear about your job. These things happen, of course. The economy is so unpredictable." Dalton turned to face her, the glass of water clutched in his hand like a lifeline. He wanted to throw it at her. He wanted to scream. Instead, he forced himself to nod. "Thank you, Cordelia. I'm sure you'll land on your feet, eventually." The way she said eventually made it clear she believed no such thing. "I should go. I just wanted to check on you both. Marisol, call me tomorrow. We'll talk more." The look she gave her daughter was loaded with meaning. Marisol nodded, not meeting Dalton's eyes. After Cordelia left, the house felt suffocatingly quiet. Marisol busied herself in the kitchen, reheating the dinner that had gone cold. Dalton watched her, this woman he thought he knew, and saw a stranger. "Murray," he said quietly. "Hmm?" She didn't look at him, focused intently on stirring the pot on the stove. "Is everything okay? You seem off." "I'm just worried," she said. "About you, about us, about everything." Us. The word felt hollow now. Was there even an us anymore? Or had there ever been one, really? "What did your mother say to you?" he asked, unable to help himself. Marisol's hand stilled on the spoon. "Just mom stuff. Worry. You know how she is." "Right." Dalton set his glass down on the counter with more force than necessary. "How she is?" Marisol finally looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, he thought she might tell him the truth. He thought she might open up, admit to her doubts, give him a chance to fight for them. Instead, she turned back to the stove. "Dinner's almost ready. Why don't you go wash up?" Dalton stood there for a long moment, staring at her back, at the woman he'd built his life around. Then he turned and walked to the bathroom, closing the door behind him. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, at a face he barely recognized. His eyes were hollow, haunted. What had he done? He'd set out to test his wife's love, and instead he'd discovered she might not love him at all. Or worse, that she'd been planning an exit strategy, that her mother had been coaching her toward divorce, that there was money he never knew about and a man waiting in the wings. But the worst part, the part that made him feel physically ill, was that he couldn't even confront her about it. Because he'd lied. He'd created this entire situation with a lie. If he told her what he'd overheard, he'd have to admit there was no firing, that this was all a test. And if he did that, she'd never forgive him. She'd use it as justification for everything, proof that he was untrustworthy, unstable, exactly what her mother said he was. He was trapped in a prison of his own making. Dinner was torture. They sat across from each other at their dining room table, the same table where they'd shared thousands of meals, and ate in near silence. Marisol pushed food around her plate, barely eating. Dalton forced himself to take bites, to chew, to swallow, even though everything tasted like ashes. "We'll be okay," Marisol said suddenly, breaking the silence. "We have savings. You'll find something new. Maybe even something better." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like lines from a script she was reading. Words she thought she should say but didn't quite believe. "Right," Dalton said. "Something better." "I believe in you," she added, but she was looking at her plate when she said it. Dalton wanted to scream. He wanted to flip the table. He wanted to tell her everything, to confess his lie and demand she confess hers. Instead, he said, "Thank you." That night, they lay in bed together, but they might as well have been on different continents. Marisol faced away from him, her breathing eventually evening out into sleep. Dalton stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. What was he supposed to do now? He'd tested his wife and failed his own test. He'd set out to prove his fears were unfounded and instead confirmed his worst nightmares. His mother-in-law wanted her to leave him. His wife had a secret trust fund. His wife's ex-boyfriend was apparently waiting in the wings. His wife had doubted their marriage 3 years ago and had told her mother, but never told him. And he couldn't confront any of it without revealing his own deception. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd been so worried about whether his wife would stand by him in hard times that he'd created a fake hard time, only to discover that real hard times had been brewing all along, hidden beneath a surface he'd thought was solid. By morning, Dalton had made a decision. He couldn't take back the lie, couldn't undo what he'd done. But he could see this through. He could use this situation, as terrible as it was, to learn the truth. If Marisol was really planning to leave him, if her mother was really pushing her toward divorce, it would all come out now. They thought he was vulnerable, defeated, at his lowest point. People showed their true colors in moments like these. So he would play the part. He would be the fired husband, the failed provider, the man on the edge. And he would watch. He would listen. He would gather the truth, piece by piece, no matter how much it hurt. And then, when he knew everything, he would decide what to do with it. But first, he needed to make the lie more convincing. He needed to commit fully to this path he'd started down, even if it led him straight into hell. That morning, Dalton got up early and went to his home office. He opened his laptop and started researching unemployment benefits, job search strategies, resume updating services. If Marisol checked his browser history, she'd see the evidence. He even composed an email to a recruiter asking about opportunities. He didn't send it, but he saved it in his drafts. Then he did something that made him feel sick to his stomach. He called his best friend, Emmett. "Dude, it's 7 in the morning," Emmett groaned when he answered. "I need your help," Dalton said quietly, stepping out onto the back porch where Marisol couldn't hear. "I need you to call me later today, around noon, and ask me about my situation. Act like you heard I got fired and you're checking in on me." There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" "I'll explain later. Just trust me. And if Marisol ever asks you about it, confirm that I told you I got fired. Please, Emmett, I need this." Another pause, longer this time. "This is about that test, isn't it? Dalton, man, tell me you didn't actually do it. Just help me, please." Emmett sighed. "Okay, yeah. Noon, got it. But you're gonna explain this to me, and it better be a damn good explanation." "Thank you," Dalton said, and ended the call. When he came back inside, Marisol was in the kitchen making coffee. She'd gotten dressed for work, her scrubs neat and pressed, her hair pulled back. "I didn't hear you get up," she said. "Couldn't sleep much," he replied, which was true. "Had to start figuring out next steps." She nodded, pouring him a cup of coffee. "That's good. Being proactive is good." They were talking like strangers, polite, careful, neither saying what they were really thinking. "I should go," she said, glancing at the clock. "I have an early shift. Will you be okay?" "I'll be fine," he said. "I've got some calls to make, some research to do." She hesitated, then crossed to him and kissed his cheek. It felt obligatory, mechanical. "I love you," she said, but the words sounded hollow. "Love you too," he replied, and watched her gather her things and leave. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, Dalton felt something inside him crack. He stood in the empty kitchen, surrounded by the life they'd built together, and wondered how much of it had been real. Had any of it been real? His phone buzzed. A text from Marisol. "Forgot to mention, Mom might stop by later to drop off some casseroles. You know how she is. Try to be nice." Dalton stared at the text. Cordelia was coming back. Why? To check on him? To push her agenda further? To assess the damage and report back to her daughter? He texted back, "Okay, thanks for the heads up." Then he sat down at the kitchen table and waited. He had a feeling the real test was just beginning. And this time, he wouldn't just be testing his wife. He'd be testing himself, seeing how much truth he could handle, how much pain he could endure before he broke completely. The doorbell rang at 10:30. Dalton opened the door to find Cordelia standing on his porch, not with casseroles as Marisol had mentioned, but with a leather briefcase and an expression that was equal parts sympathy and satisfaction. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment, and her perfectly styled silver hair didn't move in the morning breeze. "Dalton," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Everything about her tone suggested she knew exactly what kind of time she was catching him at, and that it was precisely the time she'd intended. "Cordelia," he said, closing the door behind her. "Marisol said you might bring some food by." "Oh, that." She waved her hand dismissively. "I'll have something delivered later. I actually wanted to talk to you." "Privately. Do you have a moment?" Dalton's stomach knotted. Every instinct screamed at him to say no, to make an excuse, to get her out of his house. But he needed to know. He needed to hear what she would say to him directly, what game she was playing. "Sure," he said. "Coffee?" "Please." They settled in the living room, Cordelia perched on the edge of the sofa like a bird of prey, her briefcase beside her. Dalton sat in the armchair across from her, his coffee cup warming his hands, giving him something to hold on to. "I want to be direct with you, Dalton," Cordelia began, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "I've never been one to dance around difficult subjects." "I've noticed," he said dryly. She smiled thinly. "I'm going to speak to you as I would want someone to speak to me in your position. With honesty, even if it's unpleasant." Dalton said nothing, waiting. "You're in a precarious situation," she continued. "No job, a mortgage, expenses. Marisol's salary as a nurse is good, but it's not enough to support this lifestyle on its own, not comfortably anyway." "We have savings," Dalton said, his jaw tight. "For how long? 3 months? 6? What happens after that?" She leaned forward slightly. "I'm not trying to attack you, Dalton. I'm trying to help you see reality. My daughter is 32 years old. She wants children. She wants security. She spent 7 years waiting for that security with you, and now it's gone." "It's a setback," Dalton said, fighting to keep his voice level. "People lose jobs. It happens. I'll find another one." "Will you?" Cordelia tilted her head. "The construction industry is volatile right now. Companies are cutting back. You're competing with younger workers who'll accept lower salaries. I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because someone needs to give you the truth." Dalton set his coffee cup down before he threw it. "What exactly are you trying to say, Cordelia?" "I'm saying that I care about my daughter's happiness and future, and I think you care about it too, which is why I'm going to make you an offer." She reached for her briefcase, opening it with precise movements. She pulled out a folder and set it on the coffee table between them. Dalton stared at it like it was a snake. "What is that?" "A solution," she said simply. A way for everyone to get what they need without unnecessary suffering. Dalton's heart was pounding now. I don't understand. Open it. With trembling hands, Dalton reached for the folder. Inside were papers, legal documents with dense text. But the number at the top of the first page made his vision blur. $250,000. What is this? He whispered. It's a settlement offer, Cordelia said calmly. If you agree to divorce Marisol amicably, sign away any claim to her assets or future inheritance, and do it quietly without contest, I will personally give you $250,000. That's enough to buy a condo outright, cover your expenses while you look for work, start fresh. You could even move to another city if you wanted. Start over completely. The room spun. Dalton couldn't believe what he was hearing. This woman, his mother-in-law, was sitting in his living room, offering him money to divorce her daughter. His wife. The woman he'd married 5 years ago. The woman he'd thought he'd spend his life with. You're offering me money to leave Marisol, he said, his voice hollow. I'm offering you a graceful exit from a situation that will only get worse for both of you, Cordelia corrected. You're a smart man, Dalton. You have to see that this marriage is under strain. Marisol is already doubting. She came to me 3 years ago in tears, questioning whether she'd made the right choice. Now, with you unemployed, those doubts are going to grow. It's only a matter of time before resentment sets in, before she starts to wonder what her life would have been like if she'd made different choices. She told you she had doubts 3 years ago? Dalton asked, even though he already knew the answer. He'd heard it last night in the garage. But he needed to hear it again. Needed confirmation that this nightmare was real. She did. I counseled her to give it more time, to give you another chance. And you've had that chance, Dalton. But now? Now I think it's time to be realistic about what's best for everyone. Does Marisol know you're here? The question came out choked. Cordelia's expression shifted slightly, a crack in her composed facade. Not specifically about this conversation, no, but she knows I have her best interests at heart. She knows I'm protecting her future. Her future, Dalton repeated numbly. The trust fund, the money her father left her. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're worried I'll get half of it in a divorce. Cordelia's eyes narrowed. How do you know about the trust fund? Dalton's mind raced. He'd made a mistake, revealed something he shouldn't know. Marisol mentioned it once, he lied quickly. She said her father left her some money in trust. Did she? Cordelia's tone made it clear she didn't believe him. Well, since you know about it, let me be frank. Yes, Marisol has a substantial trust fund. $2 million that becomes fully accessible to her when she turns 35, or when she has a child, whichever comes first. If she's married when either of those conditions are met, her spouse would legally be entitled to claim a portion of those assets in a divorce. My late husband, in his wisdom, built in protections, but they're not ironclad. A good lawyer could challenge them. $2 million. Dalton felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. $2 million that Marisol had never told him about. They'd struggled to save for a down payment on their house. They'd argued about whether they could afford vacations. They'd carefully budgeted every expense. And the entire time, Marisol had known there was $2 million waiting for her. She never told me, he said quietly. In 7 years, she never said a word. My daughter is a private person, Cordelia said, and frankly, it was none of your business. That money was her father's legacy to her, not to whoever she happened to marry. The words cut deep, but they also clarified everything. This was how they saw him, how they'd always seen him, not as Marisol's partner, not as family, but as an outsider, a potential threat to their wealth and security. So you're here to buy me off, Dalton said, his voice hardening, before I can get my hands on any of that money. I'm here to offer you a fresh start, Cordelia corrected. Look at yourself, Dalton. Look at your situation. You have no job. You're about to start drowning in bills. You're going to watch my daughter work herself to exhaustion trying to keep you both afloat, and you're going to resent her for it. Or worse, she's going to resent you. That resentment will poison everything. It will turn your marriage into a war zone. I've seen it happen. I lived it with my own husband before he finally became successful. I'm trying to spare you both that pain. By bribing me to leave. By offering you options. Cordelia stood, smoothing her pantsuit. Think about it. Really think about it. You could take this money, disappear, and let Marisol live the life she deserves. Let her find someone who can give her stability, children, a future without constant worry. You'd be free too. Free to start over. To find someone more compatible with your circumstances. She walked toward the door, then paused, looking back at him. I'm not the villain here, Dalton. I'm a mother protecting her daughter. Think about what's best for Marisol. If you really love her, you'll consider what I'm offering. After she left, Dalton sat frozen in the armchair, staring at the folder on the coffee table. The papers seemed to glow with accusation, with opportunity, with betrayal. His phone buzzed. Emmett, right on schedule. Hey man, heard about the job. That sucks. You doing okay? Not really, Dalton said, and it was the truest thing he'd said in days. You need anything? Want to grab lunch and talk? No, I'm good. Thanks for checking in. After he hung up, Dalton picked up the folder. He read through the papers slowly, carefully. Even though every word felt like poison seeping into his bloodstream, it was all there. A clean divorce, no contest, no claims to any assets Marisol brought into the marriage or would receive in the future. And in exchange, $250,000, payable immediately upon finalization of the divorce. It was generous, obscenely generous, which meant Cordelia was desperate, which meant she was scared he wouldn't go willingly, which meant Marisol must have said something to make her mother think this marriage was worth saving, or at least worth paying to end. Dalton's phone rang again. This time it was Marisol. Hey, she said, her voice tight with forced cheerfulness. How are you doing? Keeping busy? Your mother stopped by, he said. A pause. Oh? Did she bring food? No, she brought something else. Dalton stood. Walking to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn he'd spent hours maintaining. She brought me divorce papers and a check for $250,000. The silence on the other end was deafening. Dalton, Marisol started, but he cut her off. Did you know she was going to do that? No, God, no, I had no idea. Dalton, I swear, I didn't know anything about this. She sounded genuine, panicked even. But Dalton had thought he knew his wife's voice, and now he wasn't sure he knew anything at all. The trust fund, Mari. $2 million. Why didn't you ever tell me? Another silence. Longer this time. It's complicated, she finally said. Complicated, he repeated, his laugh bitter. Our entire marriage, and it's complicated. Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to wait until you turned 35 or got pregnant and then surprise me? It wasn't like that. My father set up that trust with conditions. I wasn't supposed to tell anyone. It was supposed to be mine, separate, protected. Protected from me, Dalton finished. Protected from your husband, from the man you supposedly loved and trusted. That's not fair. You don't understand the way my family works, the way money complicates things. No, you're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how you could keep something like this from me for 7 years. I don't understand how you could let me think we were building a life together when you had an escape hatch the whole time. I don't understand how you could tell your mother 3 years ago that you regretted marrying me but never tell me. How did you... Marisol's breath caught. Did my mother tell you that? Does it matter? Is it true? I was scared. I was going through something. I needed my mother, and I said things I didn't mean. Did you mean them when you said them? That's all I need to know, Mari. When you went to your mother 3 years ago, when you cried about marrying me, did you mean it in that moment? The pause that followed told him everything. I'm coming home, Marisol said finally. I'm leaving work. We need to talk about this face to face. No, Dalton said. I don't want you to come home. I need space. I need time to think. Dalton, please. I'll call you later. He ended the call before she could respond. Dalton stood at the window. The phone dead in his hand, the folder with Cordelia's offer on the table behind him. Everything he thought he knew had been stripped away. His wife had money she'd hidden from him. His mother-in-law wanted to pay him to disappear. His marriage had been questioned and doubted not just recently, but for years. And the worst part? He still couldn't tell the truth. He couldn't confess that he'd never been fired, that this whole situation started with his lie. Because if he did, Marisol would use it against him. She'd say he was unstable, deceptive, exactly what her mother always said he was. She'd say it justified every doubt she'd ever had. He was trapped in a maze of lies and secrets, his own and everyone else's, and he couldn't find his way out. His phone buzzed with a text, not from Marisol, from a number he didn't recognize. Dalton, this is Thaddeus Whitmore. I heard through mutual friends about your situation. If you need to talk, or if there's anything I can do to help, please reach out. I know things between Marisol and me ended long ago, but I still consider myself a friend to both of you. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone outside the immediate situation. Dalton stared at the message, his hands shaking. Thaddeus, the ex-boyfriend, the surgeon, the man Cordelia thought Marisol should have married. How did Thaddeus know about his situation? Who told him? And why was he reaching out now, at this exact moment, offering help and friendship and an opening? This wasn't a coincidence. This was orchestrated. And suddenly, Dalton realized something that made his blood run cold. This wasn't just about protecting money or pushing for divorce. This was about replacement. Cordelia wasn't just trying to remove him from Marisol's life. She was actively trying to put someone else in his place, someone who'd been waiting, someone who'd never gotten over Marisol, someone who was now conveniently separated from his own wife and positioned perfectly to swoop in and save the day. Dalton's phone rang. Marisol again. He let it go to voicemail. Then he did something he never thought he'd do. He opened his laptop, created a new email account under a fake name, and wrote a message to Thaddeus. I'm a private investigator hired to look into Marisol Whitmore's marriage. I need to know the nature of your relationship with her, past and present. This is a sensitive matter. Discretion assured. He hesitated only a moment before hitting send. If they wanted to play games, if they wanted to manipulate and scheme and plot behind his back, then he would do the same. He would find out exactly what was happening, who was involved, and what they were planning. And then he would decide whether his marriage was worth saving or whether Cordelia's offer was actually mercy in disguise. The trap he'd set for his wife had become a trap for them all. And Dalton was about to spring it. The response from Thaddeus came faster than Dalton expected. Within 2 hours, his fake investigator email received a reply that made everything snap into focus with devastating clarity. I don't know who you are or who hired you, but I won't participate in whatever this is. However, I will tell you this. I never stopped loving Marisol. When Cordelia reached out to me 2 weeks ago saying Marisol's marriage was falling apart and that I should prepare to be there for her, I initially refused. I'm not a homewrecker. But Cordelia was insistent. She said Marisol had been unhappy for years, that Dalton was dragging her down, and that when the inevitable happened, Marisol would need someone solid to lean on. She asked me to reach out after the situation developed. I don't know what situation she meant, but I assume it's the job loss. I sent that message to Dalton because Cordelia told me to, but I want it on record that I'm not comfortable with any of this. If you're investigating Cordelia's involvement in breaking up her daughter's marriage, you should know she's been planning this for a while. Dalton read the email 3 times, each word cementing the horrifying truth. 2 weeks ago. Cordelia had contacted Thaddeus 2 weeks ago. Before Dalton's fake firing, before any of this happened, which meant Cordelia had been planning to break up his marriage regardless. The firing wasn't the catalyst. It was just the excuse she'd been waiting for. Or worse, had she known somehow? Had she suspected he would do something like this? No, that was impossible. Unless... Dalton's mind raced backward, replaying conversations, moments, subtle hints he'd missed. That lunch with Emmett 3 weeks ago when his friend had told him about the test. They'd been at a sports bar downtown, not particularly quiet. Had someone overheard? Had word gotten back somehow? Or maybe Cordelia had just been waiting for any opportunity, any crack in the armor, and his test had simply aligned perfectly with her timeline. It didn't matter now. What mattered was that his mother-in-law had been actively orchestrating the destruction of his marriage, had recruited his wife's ex-boyfriend, and had been preparing for this moment. The question was, how much did Marisol know? Dalton's phone buzzed again. Another text from Marisol. Please talk to me. I'm not coming home if you don't want me to, but please don't shut me out. Whatever my mother did, whatever I did, we can fix this. I love you, Dalton. I know I haven't shown it the way I should have, but I do. Please. He stared at the message. Did she love him? Or did she love the idea of him, the life they'd built, the convenience of their routine? And even if she did love him, was love enough when it came wrapped in secrets and doubts and a family actively working against them? Dalton made a decision. He typed out a message. Come home at 6. We need to talk, really talk, about everything. Her response was immediate. I'll be there, thank you. That gave him 6 hours. 6 hours to figure out what he wanted, what he would say, what he would do. 6 hours to decide if he was going to confess his lie or use it as justification for everything that had happened. He spent those hours digging. He called the bank and, using Marisol's information that he had access to as her spouse, confirmed the trust fund, $2.3 million, held in an account he'd never known existed. Accessible when she turned 35, just 3 years away, or upon the birth of a child. He found the original trust documents in Marisol's home office, hidden in a file labeled Personal Father's Estate. He'd never looked there before, never had reason to. The papers detailed everything, the conditions, the protections, the stipulations that in the event of divorce, the trust would remain entirely with Marisol unless a spouse could prove they'd contributed directly to its growth, or that Marisol had commingled the funds with marital assets. She'd been protecting it, keeping it separate, making sure that if things fell apart, he couldn't touch it. Had she always been planning for failure? Or had her mother drilled into her that marriage was a business arrangement that required safeguards? At 5:30, Dalton made himself presentable. He showered, shaved, changed into fresh clothes. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a man who'd aged a decade in 48 hours. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper. The weight of betrayal and lies sat heavy on his shoulders. He thought about his father, who'd passed away 6 years ago from cancer. His father had loved his mother with a simplicity and totality that Dalton had always admired. No secrets, no games, no tests. Just love. Pure and uncomplicated. I'm sorry, Dad, Dalton whispered to his reflection. I made a mess of this. Marisol arrived exactly at 6. She looked exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled, her hair escaping from its ponytail. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She stood in the doorway like she was afraid to enter her own home. "Come in," Dalton said quietly. They sat in the living room, the same room where Cordelia had made her offer that morning. The folder with the divorce papers still sat on the coffee table, a silent accusation between them. "I don't know where to start," Marisol said, her voice breaking. "Start with the truth," Dalton replied. "The real truth. Not the version you think I want to hear. Not the version your mother told you to say. Just the truth." Marisol took a shaky breath. "Okay. The truth is, I've been scared. For years, I've been scared. Not of you, but of ending up like my mother. She loved my father, but she spent 20 years anxious about money, about security, about what would happen if things fell apart. Even after he became successful, she never stopped worrying, and I swore I would never be like that, but I became exactly like that." She twisted her hands in her lap. "The trust fund, my father set it up before he died. He said it was to protect me, to make sure I always had something that was mine alone. He made me promise never to tell anyone about it until it became accessible. He said money changed people, changed relationships, and that I should keep it separate from my marriage. So I did. And I know that was wrong. I know I should have trusted you with that information. But I was following my father's wishes, and I was scared that if you knew, everything would change between us." "Everything has changed anyway," Dalton said, "because you didn't trust me. You built your entire life with me on a foundation of secrets." "I know." Tears streamed down her face. "And 3 years ago, when your job was almost eliminated, I panicked. I went to my mother crying because I was terrified we'd lose everything, and she said I'd made a mistake marrying someone without family money, without a safety net. She said I should have married someone like Thaddeus. And for a moment, a horrible, weak moment, I wondered if she was right. Each word was a knife." Dalton forced himself to remain still, to listen. "But then the threat passed, you kept your job, and I realized my mother was wrong. I loved you. I chose you. Not because of money or security, but because you made me laugh, because you were kind, because you saw me as more than just Cordelia's daughter or my father's legacy. You saw me as Marisol, just Marisol." "Did you?" Dalton asked quietly. "Did you really believe that? Or did you just push the doubt away until the next crisis?" "I believed it," she insisted. "I do believe it. Dalton, when you told me you got fired yesterday, my first thought wasn't about money. It was about you. It was about how devastated you must be, how this would hurt you. Yes, I was scared about finances, but I was more scared about losing the man I loved to despair and stress." "And your mother? The conversation in the garage last night?" Marisol's face went pale. "You heard that?" "Every word." She closed her eyes, fresh tears falling. "I didn't agree with her. I told her I didn't want to talk about divorce." "But you didn't shut her down completely either," Dalton said. "You said you didn't know what to do. You said you needed time to think. You didn't tell her she was wrong, that you'd never leave me, that your marriage was worth fighting for. You wavered." "I was in shock. You just told me you lost your job, and my mother was in my ear saying all these terrible things. I didn't know how to process it all." "And Thaddeus? Did you know your mother contacted him 2 weeks ago?" Marisol's eyes widened. "What? No, how did you—" "He told me. Indirectly. Your mother has been planning this, Mari. She's been setting the stage to destroy our marriage. She recruited your ex-boyfriend. She had divorce papers drawn up. She had a bribe ready. 2 weeks ago, before I got fired, she was already making moves. Which means this isn't about my job or our finances. This is about her never accepting me in the first place and finally seeing an opportunity to remove me from your life." Marisol stood abruptly, pacing the room. "I didn't know. I swear to God, Dalton, I didn't know she contacted Thaddeus. I didn't know about the divorce papers or the money she offered you. I knew she didn't love our marriage, but I thought I thought she'd accepted it. I thought she'd backed off. She never backed off. She just went underground. And the question I have, Mari, is whether you were really oblivious or whether some part of you knew what she was doing and let it happen. How can you say that? Marisol's voice rose. How can you accuse me of conspiring with my mother to end our marriage? Because you kept secrets. Dalton stood too, his own voice rising to match hers. You kept the trust fund secret. You kept your doubts secret. You told your mother things you never told me. You built a wall around yourself and called it protection. But what it really was an exit strategy. You made sure you'd be okay if we failed. You made sure you had options. And maybe you didn't actively plan to leave me, but you made damn sure you could if you wanted to. That's not fair. That's not how it was. Then how was it, Marisol? Explain it to me. Make me understand how the woman I married, the woman I trusted with everything, could hide $2 million from me for 7 years. Make me understand how you could tell your mother you regretted marrying me, but never tell me you were struggling. Make me understand how I'm supposed to believe you love me when every choice you've made suggests you were hedging your bets. Marisol sank back onto the couch, her face in her hands, sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're right. About all of it. I was hedging my bets. I was protecting myself. Because my mother taught me that's what smart women do. They protect themselves. They don't depend entirely on anyone else. And I thought I could do both. Love you and protect myself. I thought I could have the marriage and the safety net. But I see now that you can't. You can't truly give yourself to someone while keeping one foot out the door. Dalton felt his own eyes burning. This was what he'd wanted, wasn't it? The truth. The admission. But hearing it didn't feel like victory. It felt like devastation. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. Marisol looked up, her face blotchy and wet. What? This was it. The moment where he could come clean, confess his own lie, admit that the firing that started this whole catastrophe was fake. It would even the playing field. They'd both be guilty of deception. They could both apologize and maybe find a way forward. But as he looked at his wife, broken and crying on their couch, he realized something. His lie had been a test, a stupid, immature test born of insecurity. Her lies had been a lifestyle, a pattern, a fundamental lack of trust that had shaped their entire relationship. They weren't the same. And he couldn't use his lie to excuse hers. I need time, he said instead. I need space to figure out if I can forgive this, if I can move past it. If I can trust you again. Does that mean you're considering my mother's offer? Marisol's voice was small, frightened. I don't know what it means, but I think you should stay with your mother for a few days while I figure it out. Dalton, please. You asked me what I need, Mari. This is what I need. Space. Time. I need to not look at you and see every lie, every secret, every doubt. I need to figure out if what we had was ever real, or if it was just an illusion I believed because I wanted to. Marisol stood slowly, like a woman walking to her execution. If I leave, will you be here when I come back? Or will you disappear with my mother's money? The question hung between them, sharp and painful. I don't want your mother's money, Dalton said. I want my wife, my real wife, not the version who keeps secrets and makes exit plans. Not the version who tells her mother things she won't tell me. The woman I married. The woman I thought I knew. If she exists, if she ever existed, then I want her back. But I don't know if that's possible anymore. Marisol gathered her things slowly, a bag of clothes, her toiletries, her laptop. She moved through their home like a ghost, touching things gently, as if memorizing them. At the door, she turned back. I love you, she said. I know I've done a terrible job of showing it. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back. But I do love you, Dalton. and I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll wait for you to decide if you can forgive me." After she left, the house felt cavernous and empty. Dalton stood in the silence, surrounded by the wreckage of his marriage, and wondered what came next. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Cordelia. Marisol told me she's staying with me for a few days. I assume this means you're considering my offer. It's the right choice, Dalton, for both of you. Take the money, start fresh, let her go." Dalton stared at the message, anger rising in his chest. Even now, even in the midst of her daughter's pain, Cordelia was pushing, manipulating, trying to seal the deal. He typed back, "Your daughter is worth more than any amount of money. And unlike you, I actually believe in the vows I took. I'm not leaving Marisol because things got hard. I'm taking time because we both need to figure out what we really want. Tell her I'll call in 3 days." He hit send, then blocked the number. Then he did something he should have done days ago. He called his job. "Hamilton," his boss answered on the second ring. "Hey, it's Dalton. I need to ask you something. Has there been any talk about eliminating my position? Any restructuring plans I should know about?" There was a pause. "What?" "No. Why would you think that? Your position is solid. You're one of our best PMs. Where is this coming from?" "Just checking," Dalton said, relief and guilt washing over him in equal measure. "Thanks." He hung up and sat down on the couch, in the exact spot where Marisol had been sitting moments before. His test had revealed the truth, but at what cost? His wife was gone. His marriage was in ruins. He'd discovered secrets and lies that had poisoned everything. But he'd also discovered something else. He'd discovered that when everything fell apart, when the world crashed down, he hadn't crumbled. He'd stood his ground. He'd demanded honesty. He'd refused to accept scraps of affection wrapped in deception. His phone rang. Emmett. "Dude, what the hell is going on? I just got a weird call from Marisol asking if I'd really talk to you about being fired. I played along like you asked, but seriously, what is happening?" Dalton took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without judging me until I'm done." He told Emmett everything. The test, the lie, the overheard conversation, the trust fund, Cordelia's machinations, Thaddeus's involvement, all of it. He talked for 30 minutes straight while Emmett stayed silent on the other end. When he finished, Emmett let out a long whistle. "Man, that's a lot." "I know. So what are you going to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell Marisol the truth, that I was never fired, that this was all a test. But the things I discovered were real. The secrets were real. Would telling her about my lie change any of that?" "No," Emmett said slowly, "but it would change how she sees you. Right now, you're the wronged party. You're the one who got to make demands and set boundaries. If you tell her you started this whole thing with a lie, you lose that moral high ground." "I know, but is it right to keep lying, even if my lie exposed the truth?" "I don't know, man. That's above my pay grade. But I'll tell you this. You need to decide what you want. Do you want to save your marriage? Or do you want to be right? Because you might not be able to have both." After Emmett hung up, Dalton sat in the darkness of his empty house and thought about his father. His father who had loved simply and honestly. His father who would have been ashamed of the test, the deception, the manipulation. But his father had also taught him that truth mattered, that integrity mattered, that you couldn't build anything lasting on a foundation of lies. 3 days later, Dalton called Marisol. "Can you come home?" he asked. "I've made some decisions." When she arrived, she looked as exhausted as he felt. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared thousands of meals, and Dalton took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell you something, and it's going to make you angry. It might make you hate me, but we can't move forward without complete honesty, so here it is. He told her about the test, about Emmett's story, about his doubts and fears, about the lie he'd told to see how she would react. He watched her face go through shock, disbelief, anger, and something that might have been relief. "You were never fired," she said flatly when he finished. "No, I'm sorry. It was wrong. It was manipulative and cruel, and I regret it more than I can say. But it revealed the truth about me," she said, "about the secrets I kept, about my mother's plans. If you hadn't lied, we would have just kept going, and all of this would have stayed buried until it exploded in some other way. Maybe. Or maybe we would have dealt with it like adults, through communication and therapy and actually talking about our problems." Marisol laughed, but it was bitter. "We're not very good at that, are we? Talking about problems. We're good at pretending everything is fine until it isn't." "No," Dalton agreed. "We're not." They sat in silence for a long moment. "So where does this leave us?" Marisol finally asked. "I don't know. We both lied. We both kept secrets. We both hurt each other. The question is, can we rebuild from here? And do we want to?" "I want to," Marisol said immediately. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I broke your trust in fundamental ways. But I want to try. I want to go to counseling. I want to close that trust fund account and put the money in both our names. I want to tell my mother to stay out of our marriage. I want to be the wife you thought you married. The wife I should have been all along." Dalton looked at her. This woman he'd loved for 7 years. This woman who had broken his heart and been broken in return. "It won't be easy. I know. We'll have to work at it. Really work. No more secrets. No more walls. Complete transparency about everything. I can do that. I will do that. And your mother, I've already told her she's not welcome here anymore. Not until she can respect my marriage and my choices. She's furious, but I don't care. You're my family now. You're my priority." Dalton felt something loosening in his chest, something that had been tight and painful for days. Hope, maybe, or just exhaustion. Or perhaps both. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, we can try, but Mari, if we're going to do this, we're doing it right. Counseling, honesty, all of it. And if it doesn't work, if we can't fix what's broken, we walk away clean. No bribes, no manipulation, no games. Just an honest acknowledgement that we tried and couldn't make it work." "Deal," Marisol said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Thank you for giving us another chance. Thank you for not taking my mother's money and disappearing." "I never wanted her money," Dalton said. "I only ever wanted you." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't even a clean ending. There would be months of counseling ahead, difficult conversations, moments of doubt and pain. There would be the work of rebuilding trust brick by brick. But as Dalton held his wife's hand across their kitchen table, he thought maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Not because the test had worked or because the truth had set them free, but because they'd both finally chosen to face their broken places instead of hiding from them. Sometimes love isn't about the grand gesture or the perfect moment. Sometimes it's about two imperfect people deciding that the work of staying together is worth more than the ease of walking away. And as the sun set on that difficult day, Dalton and Marisol began the long journey of learning to love each other honestly, completely, and without the armor they'd both been wearing for far too long.